Hello everyone, my name is Strange, and I believe that people should know the truth. Today, I have in my possession shocking secret documents about the activities of aliens in Lithuania. These documents became the property of the FBI archive in 2003, and it took a lot of work for my staff to get them using both legal and semi-legal, and simply put, bordering on treason methods. But we managed, and now we will publish exclusive data. Excerpts from documents and protocols are reliable, and everything outside is thoroughly thought out by our analysts. The findings are horrific, but you must be aware. We are talking about the safety of all the children of humanity on our planet. An elderly woman was drinking hot coffee in a small summer kitchen of a country house and talking with her daughter-in-law. "Are you staying long, dear? I hope you'll stay at least a week. I miss my grandchildren so much." Tall blonde Ilse sipped tea delicately and tried to show respect to her mother-in-law, but she wanted to leave as soon as possible. But the husband insisted on a trip from Vilnius to the vicinity of Palanga to his beloved mother. "So let's go." And my mother-in-law, despite her benevolence, loved to advise and command so much, and now. "Ilse, my daughter, you must tell Antanas and Nilden not to go to the sea through Naglis Mountain. Some children have disappeared there recently, a boy and a girl." "What are you doing?" Ilse put the cup down on the table. The advice was starting to annoy. "And what did the police say?" "We found a small shoe near the mountain, and nothing else." "You must tell me, but it's better to go everywhere within yourself. Where are the children now?" Naglis Mountain in the area of Palanga, despite the happy legend that gave the mountain its name, today became the place of investigation of the mysterious disappearance of two children. The mountain, in fact, was a 15-meter dune on the Baltic Sea coast. And so, in the area of this mountain, two children disappeared, 8-year-old Kaspar and his 5-year-old sister, Grazina Provinish Grolia, as everyone called her. The Provinish family lived nearby, engaged in agriculture, and the children knew the area perfectly well. Therefore, the version that the children were simply lost was rejected almost immediately. Escaped? There was also no reason for the validity of this version. There was peace and mutual love in the family. What then? What? The operative of the police commissariat of Palanga, Juozas Arvidas, once again strolled along the coast along the ill-fated mountain, looked at it and thought. Children were missing, and before that, a man of 25 years old disappeared in the area of the same mountain. No evidence, no footprints, no bodies. It's like people just came here and disappeared. The dogs were confidently picking up the trail. They took the dog handlers to the slide and started spinning in one place, losing track. Juozas scratched his head and took out a notebook from his breast pocket. "Hey, Volodya, come here." His assistant, a Russian who remained in Lithuania after the collapse of the USSR, ran up to the operative. "What, Juozas? This case is the second in the district, and already the 5th in Palanga. Do you understand?" Vladimir Bolshakov sucked in air with his lips and whistled. "Series. That's exactly it. We need to report to Vilnius." "Do you think a serial killer?" "No, it's something else. My gut tells me that it's not a simple matter." Vladimir, a little overweight, short, adjusted his baseball cap, spat and took out a pack of cigarettes. "Will you report today?" Juozas sighed. "Yes, listen, Volodya, call Raymond and Lemore from the commissariat. Let them question the witnesses again. Find out if there is a precinct officer in their village. Let him organize a patrol of the area. We will assume that we have taken the initial measures." From the operational summary, Palanga, 2003. On September 27, 2003, two children, Kaspar and Grazina Provinish, 8 and 5 years old, respectively, were reported missing. The trail led to Naglis Mountain, where evidence was found, a child's shoe, identified by the mother. The shoe belonged to Grazina Provinish. Further searches were unsuccessful. The testimony of Borbalis citizen MT, 48 years old, has not been employed since 2001. Suffers from alcohol addiction. The readings are being checked. The light of the table lamp was shining directly into my eyes. It was dark and smelled of tobacco smoke. Juozas Arvidas was sitting on a table in his office and smoking, exhaling smoke towards the interrogated Borbalis, who was sitting on a chair in the middle. "So, my friend, let's start from the beginning. What did you see?" Borbalis wheezed with his split lips, and a trickle of blood flowed onto his collar. "I came here myself. I'm the one." Vladimir Bolshakov, who was standing behind him, slapped him on the back of the head. Tell me already. You're the one who kidnapped the kids. You son of bitch, you. Speak. The words were followed by another slap on the back of the head and a punch to the head. Joseph smiled and took another drag on his cigarette. Don't be that, Volodya. He's going to say everything himself and go to the cell to sleep. If he behaves well, we'll make him coffee too. Don't you want coffee? Or better yet, 100 grams, eh? Borbolis said something inarticulate. 100 grams? If he manages to get out of here, he'll stop drinking altogether. He won't even touch this damn vodka. Joseph stubbed out his cigarette butt and picked up a notebook. Let's do it again in order. And remember, we all know. Or do you want my colleague to continue the interrogation? Borbolis tried to get up, but was pushed back into the chair by Vladimir's strong palms. Well, how is it? Will you tell me? Okay. Now, the man coughed and choked. Catching his breath again, continued. At 8 in the evening it happened. I was fishing near the hill, yes, near Naglis Mountain. Suddenly I heard some kind of whistling, grinding. I ran along the shore and saw how, as the mountain opened up and 2 kids were sucked into some kind of hole, they were playing there, building something. Listen, Commander, I didn't touch these children. I didn't touch it. Joseph got up from the table. Vladimir clung to the shoulders of the interrogated and pulled the chair towards him, throwing it back. Joseph came close and bent down, lifted Borbolis's face by the chin. I will arrange everything now, you will sign, and you will wait for the trial, impartial and fair. You understand? Borbolis was silent. Borbolis dropped his head on his chest. Vladimir, bring him to condition and draw up a protocol. I'm sure that this nit took the children away and then buried them somewhere. Find out if possible. They'd only reported to Vilnius in vain. The case was solved. I'm listening. The main directorate of the Lithuanian Police Commissariat, Vilnius, 2003.
Another report has been received, this time from Palanga. The disappearance of 2 children of different sexes. During the year, there were 12 similar cases of children disappearing without a trace in the regions of Lithuania, with a distance of 2 to 3 km inland from the Baltic Sea. Send special agents to Palanga, conduct a detailed investigation, interrogate on the spot, and then transfer the witness of the incident, Borbolis MT, to Vilnius. The interrogation protocol, as well as all the circumstances, should be classified. Information should not be leaked. The case of missing children may be indirectly related to the periodic detection by sonar stations of unknown metallized objects in the Baltic Sea at a distance of up to 1 kilometer from the coast. A survey of the squares by military boats and scuba divers did not yield results. Currently, 12 reconnaissance and search groups are involved. Public Security Service, Lithuania, Vilnius. For the combined data obtained and analyzed, the case in Palanga confirms our guess about the connection of incidents of missing children with the actions of unidentified entities, quite possibly unidentified marine objects. Further illegible, written in digital cipher. The special services of the Russian Federation refused to help. The request was sent twice. I propose to transfer all information to the NATO headquarters, Brussels, through established contact. Conduct a joint investigation, classify the results of the investigation. List of similar incidents in 2002 to 2003. August 17, 2002, Shwentoi, the disappearance of Martin Puskapelis, 11 years old. September 21, 2002, Klaipėda, the disappearance of Mark Sarkut and Egil Petrauske, 9 and 8 years old. On October 11, 2002, Jutkrant, the disappearance of Ruth Skumpate and Neil Juskin. On July 11, 2003, Klaipėda, the disappearance of Christina Norbele, 6 years old. September 27, 2003, Palanga, the disappearance of Kaspar and Grazina Pravinish, 8 and 5 years old. To date, the children are wanted, with the exception of the case of Pravinish's brother and sister. No witnesses or evidence have been found. Regarding the evidence, a child's shoe of the 29th size, 18.5 centimeters, was found. The evidence was seized from the special storage of the police commissariat of the city of Palanga. During the instrumental examination, it was revealed that the shoe, which means, hypothetically, and the Grazina Pravinish who wore it, the shoe was identified by the mother of the missing one, were exposed to a powerful magnetic field induced by a powerful source at the same time. The slipper is able to deflect the compass needle when it is held up. In addition, when placing the slipper in a metallized sphere, a distinct signal of induction radiation is recorded. At this stage, the investigation is continuing on its own.
Just a second ago, little Caspar and Brazina were frolicking at the foot of the dune, running in and out of the gentle slope. They laughed merrily and enjoyed life. After a moment, the uncomprehending children, who did not even have time to scream, were dragged inside. An unknown, inescapable force squeezed their bodies and slowly dragged them down the elongated shaft, further and further into the belly of the mountain. The boy and the girl lost consciousness. The awakening was easy, unobtrusive. Caspar was the first to open his eyes and put out his hand, quickly sat up and shook his curly head. "Regina, Rolia, where are you?" The girl stretched, yawned sweetly, opening her pink mouth. "I'm here, and where are we?" The boy looked around. An ordinary room, similar to a nursery. White walls, somehow papered with multicolored wallpaper, picked up at random. The fragment of the elephant stuck into half of the cloud, and the half of the cloud continued to represent an unknown fabulous bird. The edges of the wallpaper were peeled off, forming tunnels at the top of the ceiling and at the bottom of the floor. The children woke up lying on the floor among a lot of toys piled in heaps. Regina saw the doll and pulled it towards her, began to babysit. Caspar couldn't figure out where they were and, most importantly, how they got here. After all, they played at Nagelstuen, and now they are in the nursery. They must have fallen asleep on the sand or lost consciousness. Mom often said that if you walk along the shore for a long time and late, you can faint from fatigue and find yourself in the lair of a sea monster. Really? "Rolia, aren't you scared?" The girl was playing with a doll and smiled. "No, Mom will come and pick us up soon." Caspar began to look for a way out. Suddenly, one of the walls began to fragment. A rectangle appeared in the middle, which first pushed forward, and then back and moved aside. An opening opened and a man entered. At least that's what it seemed to both children at first. The man was wearing a torn shirt and sweatpants. He was walking slowly forward on straight legs, which gave his gait some kind of strangeness anomaly. The man barely uttered, "Don't be afraid. You are not in danger. Don't be afraid." The children, as if hypnotized, looked at the man and began to notice what horrified them. Wires stretched from the man's head and back into the opening with woven scarves. The man's head was tilted, but when he, obeying unknown forces, lifted it, the children saw a gouged eye hanging from the socket on nerves. The man was dead, but he was walking forward, muttering under his breath, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid." Rolia, with her sharp eyesight, saw that the man's head was emitting a barely perceptible glow. She screamed, and Caspar immediately screamed, blocking Rolia with himself. In desperation, Caspar threw a metal train at the man, but the man did not stop. Immediately after him, two creatures appeared in the doorway, thin gray arms and legs, large mouthless heads with huge black eyes. The creatures unceremoniously pushed the man aside like a doll and headed towards the children. The children were numb with fear, and a small puddle formed under the roof. Since then, no one has ever seen the children again. The only thing left after the disappearance is one small pink shoe with small pom-poms on the toes. Caspar and Rosina's mother came to Nagelstuen, cursed it, and sometimes cried, beat her hands in the sand, and begged to give her the children. Her mother's heart told her the children were taken by the dune, or what was hidden in it. Years later, she never once recalled the stories of local drunks who saw on dark nights how the mountain emits radiance, flashes, or talks to those who came to it. The day was too long for me to have any strength to walk home. That's why I had to order a taxi. There was complete silence in the car. Only the sound of the engine and wheels could be heard. "Why are you coming home so late?" Suddenly, the driver's voice was heard. I hesitated, not even understanding the question at first. "They left you for the second shift, but why are you interested?" The driver shrugged, keeping his eyes on the road. There was silence again, but after a few seconds, it was interrupted again by a man. "You must be paid a lot for such hard work." I chuckled in my heart. "No, sir, it's not like that at all." He said nothing again, and then took one hand off the steering wheel and held it out to me. "I'm William." "Jennifer," I said, holding out my hand in return. "Yes, I know." At first I didn't understand how he knew my name, but after a moment it dawned on me. He must have seen my name on the taxi booking site. We continued on the road in silence, and I watched Boston at night from the window until the car stopped. "Goodbye." I handed him a bill at $9.44. The taxi drove away, leaving me standing on the wet asphalt road. I ran home as fast as I could. My apartment was on the ground floor, so I quickly reached it. Tom. I know. Surprisingly, there was only silence in response. Tom is my younger brother, and after our parents went missing, I became his legal guardian. The boy was still that restless and demanded a lot of attention, which I could not give. Tom? Maybe he's sleeping, I thought. Taking off my outer clothes, I went into the room. It was empty. It was the same situation in the kitchen. My brother was nowhere to be found. Tom, where are you? There was only silence in response. That's enough. Come out. I'm not playing hide and seek. For the first time in my life, the frightening silence sounded so deafening, and my heart seemed to skip beats. What if Tom is missing, left home, and got lost? Or worse, what happened? But at that moment, I heard a rustle behind my back, and immediately realized that he probably wanted to scare me. I pretended not to notice how he was standing behind me, and continued to wait for a few more seconds for him to jump out shouting boo. But nothing happened. Just silence. I wanted to call him, but as soon as I turned around, I saw only a vague tall shadow. I didn't even have time to scream. Someone's nasty sticky hand pressed my mouth. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I do not know how many hours later I woke up, but my body ached as if someone had used me as a soccer ball. I started looking around and was horrified when I remembered what had happened to me. I was kidnapped. There was no light, of course, and I had to look through the veil of darkness. It turned out that I was in the storage room. Finding the door handle by touch, I pulled it and was immediately blinded by a bright light. After getting used to the bright light a little, I finally stepped out from behind the threshold. There were different control panels around. Everything was flooded with different buttons and levers. What the? I whispered to myself. With short steps, I made my way to the center of the room. My legs buckled, and my eyes were running in different directions. My mind couldn't focus on one thing. Jennifer? A native voice was heard. Tom? I ran towards his voice. My brother was crying and desperately calling for me, and I ran to him, sweeping away everything in my path. Tom. I opened the door to the room where his voice was coming from. Jennifer, my brother shouted. He ran to meet me, but in an instant something intercepted him. My heart skipped a beat. An incomprehensible creature with long, skinny arms grabbed my younger brother. For a moment, it seemed to me that my whole body was paralyzed and I stood scared, not daring to move. But as soon as I heard Tom's startled scream, I rushed towards the monster, forgetting about my fear. Let him go. I was grabbed by the same vile creature from behind. I resisted as much as I could, but I was very weak compared to them. Not going to give up, I kept kicking and pulling away from the grip. Let them go. As soon as we heard that painfully familiar voice, the monsters immediately let us go. My brother and I rushed to each other and locked arms. Now that Tom was around, I decided to look at our rescuer. And at the same moment she froze. Are you? That taxi driver William was looking at me with a blank expression on his face. Yes, Jennifer, it's me, he grinned nastily. Then, with a light gesture, he ordered those creatures to move away from us. And they immediately obeyed his command. Oh, dear Jennifer, you have so much to learn. William squatted down next to us, and then reached out and touched a strand of my hair. I immediately recoiled, waving away his hands, while hugging my younger brother tightly to me. Why do you steal us? I almost cried out. No need to get hysterical. I'll explain everything. But first, let's settle down wherever it is more convenient. In just a moment, these monsters brought chairs from somewhere. Now I finally have a moment to get a better look at these alien weirdos. Just the sight of them made me shudder at once. Their disproportionate, emaciated body is in a dead purple shade. The head was huge compared to the body. They just had two holes instead of a nose. But the most frightening thing is their bottomless eyes, just like those of some insects. The aliens emitted a terrible cadaverous smell, and their bodies seemed to pour out tons of vile mucus. We got from the floor in disbelief and still sat down on the chairs. William began his story. It all started 20 years ago. I met a girl named Mary. Suddenly, I felt a twinge in my heart. Mother, he's talking about her. But how does William know my mother? Mary was one of us. She wasn't human. She had alien blood in her, and I thought we were made for each other. But Mary didn't love me. She fell in love with a stupid little man. She betrayed our people, and therefore soon paid the price. What did you do to Mom? William's lips curled into a sinister smile. Is he involved in the disappearance of his parents? I didn't want to believe it. The realization that we are now trapped by a man who has deprived us of our father and mother made me shudder. Mary escaped from her people to another planet, decided that she could hide and live a human life. A pathetic traitor, she clearly deserved what we did to her. Tom moved closer to me and settled closer. I felt how scared my brother was, and I felt the same way he did. But I tried to seem stronger. I'm an adult. I always have to help everyone. It's my duty as an older sister to be afraid of nothing. Where are we? Having gained strength, I asked a question. It's a UFO, my dear. I understand this may seem like a joke, but if you don't believe it, the window will help you. At the same moment, my brother and I rushed to the round porthole. Beyond the glass was a bottomless, dark and mesmerizing cosmos. We were in space. All chances of escape and rescue immediately disappeared. We are doomed. Why? Why are you doing this? Bitter tears came to my eyes. What have we done to you? Tom is still a little boy. He didn't even have time to go to first grade. We are not to blame for what our parents did. Maybe you didn't do anything, but according to the rules of our planet, children bear the burden of responsibility for their parents' actions. But we are not on your planet. But you have alien blood flowing in you. With these words, William seemed to put an end to our conversation. But I wasn't going to stop. Not today. And what will you do with us? At the same moment, everything went quiet. Everyone held their breath, and the buzzing of the machines suddenly stopped for a couple of seconds. I've never been in such silence in my life. It was only 5 seconds later that William looked up and looked me straight in the eye. I'm sorry, but you were supposed to be my children. Mary made a mistake. She gave birth to you. Before I knew it, the aliens began to slowly approach us, and William was walking briskly out of the room. They wanted to kill us, to kill completely innocent children. Jenny, I'm scared. My brother muttered in a half-whisper, will they kill us? I didn't want to die, we had to live. Was it really all for nothing? Our whole life will end like this in a minute. No. I grabbed Tom's arm and rushed forward behind the monsters. We ran as fast as we could without looking back. I could feel the vile creatures chasing us, stomping loudly with their huge clawed paws. I could hear them growling, baring their sharp teeth. My heart was beating deafeningly, as if it would jump out right now. Tom, please don't stop, I shouted, tightening my grip on my younger brother's wrist. We rounded a bend and found ourselves in a cramped corridor, engulfed in pitch darkness. This way, I whispered, pulling my brother with me into some kind of closet. I closed the door behind me and pressed my back against it. We were trying to catch our breath. Tom snuggled up to me and whimpered softly, trying to calm down. I stroked my brother's hair. Everything will definitely be fine, necessarily. I was on the verge of bursting into tears right there. It turned out that a small room was supposed to be illuminated by one lamp, but it had already burned out and only occasionally began to blink. Suddenly, footsteps were heard. I hugged my brother to me and held my breath. The monsters roamed the corridor. They scraped the floor with their long legs, probably leaving behind traces of sharp claws on their paws. I could feel them breathing. I could hear them falling silent and stiffing as they continued their search. Pressing my hand to my face, I tried my best not to make even the slightest rustle. And now it seems that all the creatures are gone. I relaxed and finally inhaled the desired air. My brother and I were about to get up, but at that moment, there was a deafening scream right outside our door. It was there, right outside the door. I clung to Tom with all my strength, closing my mouth in fright so as not to scream. Tears quietly dripped onto his knees, and his breath disappeared and reappeared. I prayed that they wouldn't find us. I prayed to all the gods that exist in this world, and it seems they heard me. That day, we fell asleep in this closet with our arms around each other. I tried not to let go of Tom for a second, clinging to him with a death grip. His small, defenseless body was trembling in my hands. It hurt me that I couldn't do anything. We woke up in the morning to a scream coming to us. It was William. How could you lose them? Where do you think they went? Search all corners and find them. A shudder went through my body. Tom was still asleep, curled up against my chest. If we haven't been found yet, then maybe there is at least some percentage that we can escape. At least that's what I kept hoping for. We had to get out of here as quickly as possible. I woke Tom up, and we gathered our thoughts and quietly went out into the corridor. It was still dark here, and only one flashing lantern illuminated our path. It was incredibly scary, but we tiptoed quietly down the corridor. Suddenly, footsteps were heard from behind, and my brother and I hurried to the front. Wait, there was a soft female exclamation. We stopped and turned around. A short girl with her hair tied in a ponytail was running towards us. I'll help you out, she said sharply. We look at each other incredulously. "Who are you?" The girl smiled faintly. "I'm your aunt." I stared at the stranger in surprise. "An aunt?" I wanted to ask her again, but she beat me to it. "We don't have much time, go ahead. Follow me." We ran after our aunt without looking. Everything was going very strangely. I ran after her, holding my brother by my side so as not to lose him. "Aunt Averin," my aunt suddenly blurted out. We went out into the main hall where Tom and I met William yesterday. Surprisingly, the room was empty. Averin ran to the control panel. It felt like she understood this more than we did, so I decided to just trust her. My aunt started pulling the multicolored levers in different sequences, while I looked back every second for fear of being caught. "We don't have much time. Sit in these chairs and buckle up." The request was fulfilled without hesitation this very minute. "Averin, what's going on?" William and the others went outside. "We have an opportunity to escape." The brain couldn't believe it. Do we really have a chance to survive? "Jennifer, listen here carefully." She turned to face me. "Now we're going to fly away, leaving them here in outer space. Do you understand me?" I nodded. And at the same moment, my aunt turned to the control panel and pressed the start button. Everything shook. Tom grabbed onto me to keep his balance, and so we flew away. We left William and his gang of aliens in an open, boundless space, fraught with many terrible secrets. We were saved thanks to my aunt, although, as it turned out later, it was more likely that my aunt was saved thanks to us. She had been held captive by these creatures for many years because of her sister's act, and Tom and I will definitely appreciate what she has done for us.
3 boys, 12-year-old Bobbins Charlie, and 10-year-old twin brothers Sturk and Ruan McNosley were sitting on a low, washed-out bank of the Colorado River, which bends along the outskirts of Collins Park in Austin. Saturday summer morning has just begun. The boys, stupefied by freedom and lack of school in the first month of summer, by August had already lost a little of their former zeal and desire to bully, but they were Texans, and that left its indelible marks on the character. A free state of free southern Moors, where it is not clear who is American and who is Mexican. Everything is intertwined by a wave of people and common life on this God-blessed land. Bobbins threw a smooth stone into the water, trying to make it bounce off the water. It failed, and the guy threw the second stone out of frustration just so that there would be more splashes. "What are we going to do today, ladies?" In conversation, he always emphasized his seniority by 2 years. Often called the brothers small fry, bugs, crumbs, or ladies. Sometimes the twins didn't pay attention to it, and sometimes they bled their friend's nose. This time they looked at each other. Ruan's eyes sparkled with a little malicious lights. His brother shook his head negatively, making it clear that there would be no fight today. Ruan smiled approvingly. The sparkle in his eyes quickly faded. Both brothers were red as fire and freckled. They were teased at school, sometimes called carrots. But this school year, one of the daredevils from a parallel science class dubbed them crumpled mashed potatoes with ketchup. It was kind of funny, and somehow Bobbins Charlie found out about it. "Well, why are you silent, mashed potatoes with ketchup? Are we gonna sit on the shore?" Sturk stood up and straightened his t-shirt with a portrait of Will Fuller, a player on the Houston Texans American football team. He was very proud of his t-shirt, and now he noticed with bewilderment that his idol's eye and forehead were covered with dry light spots. He tried to wipe them off with his fingers, but it didn't work. Did the laundry kid get his t-shirt dirty? I told you, ice cream in this heat is eaten either only by the insane or by such brats as you. Sturk was looking at Bobbins, and Rowan had also risen from the shore. "Do you want to get yourself a bump? What are you looking for?" Charlie Bobbins was much stronger than his friends and was not afraid to fight, but together they could easily beat him up. The redhead twins got good at fighting, even had their own technique, a back and front knocker, as they called it. And the technique was simple but effective. Sturk attacked from the front, trying to immediately charge the enemy in the nose, and Ruan ran from behind and began to hammer at the neck and shoulder blades. The effect was amazing. Even now, Ruan has already begun to try on how to run behind his back, but Bobbins held up his hands and smiled. "That's it. I give up. I give up, you little brats. So what? Are we just gonna sit here?" Ruan lowered his fist. "I don't know. Mom said we have to be back before noon. It's fucking Saturday and we have to go to mass with her." Rowan nodded. "Yeah, that's right. And tomorrow." Bobbins chuckled. That's because your dad's a cop and he's still on the district council, and I am not tormented by masses or services. Ruin grinned now. That's because you go to the synagogue with your whole family. That's what our mother says. Well, it was quite true. Black-haired and curly-haired. Charlie Bobbins was Jewish. So what? This did not stop him from running around the streets, chasing cats, breaking windows, fighting with boys, and running away from home at the crack of dawn. It's true that the McNosley boys themselves had never visited Bobbins and did not know how he lived. Stir continued his brother's banter. And Mom also said that Jews are circumcised. Bobbins picked up a stone and threw it back into the river, and then calmly replied, I bet my sausage is bigger than the two of you put together. In short, I have suggestions. Carrot Brothers. The boys were interested. Bobbins looked closely, squinted, thinking something to himself. I don't even know whether to tell you or not. The boys were even more interested. Tell me, Charlie, what did you come up with? Won't you tell anyone? Rowan screamed. I swear by my feathers I won't tell anyone. Stirk ran a finger under his Adam's apple. I'll die without confession if I tell anyone. Bobbins approached them. Maybe we should go to the old barrel factory, huh? Weak! Ruin and Stirk grimaced. Charlie, you know, our faith strictly forbade us to go to the factory. And what should I do there? I heard homeless people and other rabligater. They're from all over Austin. Maybe we'll go to the playground near Mr. Skoll's house. Last time, he let us go for a swim in the pool. Charlie was waiting for this. He began to run around the brothers, purring and giggling, trying to imitate the voice of the McNosley brothers' mother. Don't go to the factory, my dear ladies. There are evil bums there. Oh, what can they do to you? Oh, what can they do? But suddenly he stopped and took a large glass ball out of the pocket of his denim shorts. Have you seen it? If you don't go to the barrel factory, then you will never have such a ball. I found him there in one of the hangars. Can you imagine? Ruin immediately extended his hand. Let me see. What else? Charlie put the balloon back in his pocket. You will, and I know your thieving ways, the McNosley brothers. Or, to put it more simply, mashed potatoes with ketchup. Well, are you coming or not? Needless to say, the boys wanted a glass ball, so brightly shimmering with sunlight in the middle of a bright day. But the image of their father, Carmichael McNosley, also appeared in their heads in parallel with the image of the happy possession of a glass sphere. A strong-willed, broad face with a large, heavy chin, small black eyes and thick eyebrows, a high, strong forehead. The boys almost never saw their father without a policeman's uniform, only once, at the funeral of their neighbor, Mr. Bruslovsky, and without his beloved Texas wide-brimmed white hat. Her father always wore only her, neglecting the uniform headdress was very suitable, and could easily give a slap in the hands to anyone who grabbed his hat. My father was strict and could punish. There were 3 punishments: an evening without dinner, deprivation of pocket money for a month, or a belt. Which of these was better? The boys found it difficult to say. It happened that all 3 punishments followed at the same time, and not infrequently. Bobbins took the balloon out of his shorts again and raised his hand up to catch the sun's rays in it. Have you seen how it glows? I think that if you light candles at night, then you can see your destiny in such a ball. We watched the Friday show. Where are the psychics? The boys, of course, watched this show, since in their family, as in many American families, evening TV viewing was started. My father, by the way, frankly said that all this was bullshit and staging, but the boys and their mother, Mrs. Loretta McNosley, took everything at face value. The brothers nodded their curly red heads. We saw it. The last episode is generally cool. It's even cooler than the Highway Patrol and the Malibu Rescuers. Bobbins chuckled. Well, you've already had enough. Nothing compares to Rescuers. Will you go or not? On bikes, one foot is there, the other is at home. You'll be in time for your mass. The 2 red-haired boys looked at each other, read something in each other's eyes, and decided to go. The McNosley brothers had such a feature or something, the ability they could understand each other without talking, without words. And it wasn't that they were siblings or twins who understood each other's character and habits. They heard specific words like a distant whisper. It happened even when the boys were in different rooms. Ruin and Stirk once told their parents about this. Father said as usual, "Stop making things up. And Mom believed, hugged the boys, and said with a happy smile, "Of course, boys, you are brothers. It was the same for me with my sister, your Aunt Catherine. I'll tell you about it sometime." 10 minutes later, the boys were already racing along the sidewalk of a quiet suburban neighborhood riding their bicycles. Charlie Bobbins raced ahead, and the brothers rode behind him, rushing past storefronts and summer shops. Driving by a grocery store, they saw their neighbor from Peach Avenue, an elderly woman, Polly Grunberg, in the glass of the window behind which the trading floor opened, and she noticed them too. The boys were somewhat worried about this. It sounded in Ruin's head. "Rui, do you think she'll tell Mom?" Ruin replied to his brother. "I think not. And what about? We're just walking. There's still an hour and a half before Mass. But your mom will definitely kick you for a t-shirt." Bobbins shouted, turning around. "Push it up, guys. The factory is still a whole block away. If we talk about the factory, then once the entire huge building belonged to a community of patrons led by Mr. Rasposeco, but this was back in the century before last. The factory produced wooden barrels for salting pork and then sold throughout the southern United States and Mexico. In the middle of the 20th century, in the fat post-war years, when the dollar was stronger than ever, the factory surprisingly went bankrupt, and its entire territory with workshops, plant management, workshops and garages became the property of the city and then was sold at auction. For some time, the factory was used as a huge repair base for agricultural machinery and trucks, but in the 80s, the new owner, as well as the previous ones, suffered bankruptcy. It was even rumored that he committed suicide by shooting himself in the forehead. The boys, in other respects, were not interested at all. It was a fun 2002 years old, they were 10 years old, and the only thing they were interested in was the opportunity to find somewhere in an abandoned factory, which everyone continued to call a barrel, a glass ball exactly like Bobbins's, damn it. Or maybe you can find something more interesting. Their small business was overshadowed only by the fact that their mother was waiting at home for their imminent return, and also by the fact that their father strictly forbade them to visit the barrel factory. He didn't explain why. He just slashed the edge of his palm on the table and forbade it. This area was closed to boys, but the prohibitions exist to break them, even though it was a little uncomfortable. It sounded insinuating in Ruin's head. "Wash, maybe we'll go back, huh? After all, Father forbade us to go there. Do you remember him telling me that some kind of murderer was caught there?" The washing itself was pedaling, and from his brother's question, almost stumbled into a huge garbage can, but drove around it in time at all the speed that his old bike was doing. "I don't even know. Kids are scratching at my soul. But that asshole Bobbins will then tell everyone how scared we are. And the killer must have been fried in the electric chair a long time ago." "Perhaps you're right. But if Father finds out, he'll skin us alive." Sturk caught up with his brother and said in a voice, "Well, let's go straight for a little bit. We'll find it. If we won't find it, it doesn't matter. We'll just stop by there so that asshole Bobbins doesn't talk about us later. Okay?" Rowan nodded. "Yes, sir." And the two boys rode faster after the retreating Robins. After 20 minutes of frantic racing along the sidewalk and alley, they left the neighborhood and turned onto a short dirt track, once strewn with gravel, but now abandoned. The old track from heavy-duty vehicles was captured in the middle of the primer. It was washed away by water every autumn and spring, and sanded in every summer, but it was still clearly visible. The boys drove along the concrete slabs of a high fence and rolled up to a rusted mesh gate, which was entangled with a powerful chain and locked. Bobbins gave an Indian whoop and shook his curly mane of black hair. "Whoa, Idaho, we're here. Wagons in a circle, brothers crumpled mashed potatoes with ketchup. Wagons in a circle, hand out Winchesters." He cheerfully jumped off his bike and leaned it against one of the gates, and then jumped and clung to the chain link like a cat, pulled himself up and climbed to the top like a monkey. Distorting the voice, imitating the accent of the Mexicans, he barked from a height. "Hey, white gringos, will you still be chewing gum there? Or will you still do the real thing?" The boys succumbed to a playful mood. Sturk clapped his brother on the shoulder. "Hey, Captain McNosley, take down the arrogance of this soldier who encroached on our holy state of Texas." Ruin shouted cheerfully, "Yes, Mr. General!" He grabbed the net and began to climb up, intending to attack Bobbins, but he was already climbing down from the back. You can't get to me, gringo. He ended his sentence with a loud laugh and said more seriously, Climb over, but carefully. The pipe fell off at the top. I almost scratched my arm for the first time. The three boys were looking at a huge grey concrete workshop. To Rouen, this huge monotonous building with almost no windows seemed like a ship crashing into the ground at the corners. A ship, washed up on the shore, who knows how and when. Sturk, on the other hand, thought of the main building of the factory as a huge closed labyrinth, in the depths of which Theseus led people to the light, defeating a terrible monster, a bull-headed, bloodthirsty minotaur. He thought so under the impression of the recently read book Myths of Ancient Greece. Optional reading for the summer. He was very fond of reading. The boys stared at the building in silence and did not dare to take a step forward. Well, ladies, are you coming or what? It's closed there. You need to go around from the north side. There the wall is cracked at the very base and you can crawl up. Bobbins went first, talking about the factory as he went. He sounded like he was not only 2 years older than the McNausley boys, but 10 years older. When you were still brats, I heard from my father that his grandfather worked in this factory for $1.50 an hour. I was making some pieces of iron. Rouen laughed. How could your grandfather work there if you came to our city only 3 years ago? Sturk agreed. Yes, I remember how you moved. You and some skinny woman, then Mr. Duber from the house across the street helped you carry things. Bobbins turned around silently, but then brightened up. So I didn't move to your city, we moved to your neighborhood. As it is, we all used to live near the Southern Congress. Rowan nodded understandingly. Oh, I know. Dad said that only rich people live there. Bobbins walked on and said with some dignity, That's right, baby. All right. They walked around the north side of the building, sometimes stumbling over the bulging mounds of cracked asphalt, through which weeds made their way in some places. Is everything that old? And the wall that cracked, you say it won't collapse? Bobbins laughed. Have you already peed in your pants, baby? Come on, help me. Bobbins himself grabbed a hefty wooden pallet and began to move it to the side. The boys helped him, and a large crack opened in front of them, narrowing to the top. Not only a 10-year-old boy could easily get into the crack, but also a fully grown man if you look at it. The darkness in the chasm of the crack and the overhanging bulk of the building caused excitement in the brothers. Charlie, get in first, and we're right behind you. You've been there before, haven't you? So you'll show us the way. Charlie Bobbins grinned as he chewed on a plucked straw. Whatever you say, young sir, but it seems to me that you are afraid. But no one argued or made excuses. Just the eldest boy in their company bent down, got on all fours and climbed into the hole. The crack was very wide, only at the base. A minute later, it came from inside. Well, will you be standing there for a long time? They followed me. Carmichael McNausley had been a member of the Federal Police Service of Texas for several years, was a good Christian, father and husband, and that would be all right, but his principled, puritanical character, his uncompromising nature and stubbornness often played tricks on him. He was a patrolman and was responsible for the part of the area where he and his family lived, reporting to the Internal Police Department. He coped with his job, gave a lapel to any punk or punks who somehow got into their quiet sleeping paradise. At one point, he was even elected as a member of the District Council for Municipal Affairs. But he never made reliable friends, and his partners all ran away from him as one. The latter was still holding on. It was a paradox, but everyone who did not want to continue serving with McNausley beat their fists in their chests, said that McNausley was a great man and an officer, coped well with the service, did not go into trouble, but at the same time was not afraid to act. That's just they did not want to serve with him. The reason is simple. Officer Carmichael McNausley himself always aspired to be the best in everything and demanded this from his partners, getting them to the very livers. Carmichael reached into the breast pocket of his light-colored tunic to get cigarettes, but did not find them there. That's right, they were in the glove compartment. But they weren't there either. A partner named Miguel realized what his colleague wanted. Amigo, are you looking for cigarettes? You threw out the pack yourself an hour ago. Carmichael nodded his head. Yes, indeed. We need to stop by and buy. Miguel, can you lend me a cigarette? The partner reached into his pocket and handed Carmichael a pack. Is something wrong, amigo? You're not yourself today. Is there a problem at home? Carmichael drove along the avenue in silence, looking through the windows of the house to his left. I understand, amigo. I have these extra patrols on Saturdays. That's where they sit. Miguel raised his palm to eye level with a visor. Carmichael blew out smoke. It is our duty. We must maintain law and order. And I will tell you, Officer Forano, that we must do this not only on duty, but all the time while we are awake. The US government and taxpayers have entrusted us with this form and this authority to protect order under our flag. Miguel turned to the glass and looked at the houses on the right. That's it. His partner got carried away. Lectures on duty and law are about to begin. Responsibilities and things like that. Then he will weave in the Bill of Rights and Freedoms, that's for sure. But that didn't happen. Officer McNosley braked sharply, grabbed the walkie-talkie from the console. Central Patrol Crew 12, corner of Main and Rose Boulevard, Zilga Park District, send reinforcements. He got out of the car, tossing to Miguel. Cover up. Miguel looked somewhat dumbfounded at his partner, running across the street to a neighboring house, from behind the closed fence of which a thin gauze of black smoke was rising. The gate was open and Carmichael ran in, his hand on his holster. Miguel followed, not touching the weapon. After a few minutes, everything became clear. The Hutchinson family, husband, wife, and 5 of their children were lighting coals under a barbecue grill. The grill was old, the coals did not light up and smoked. The head of the family smiled affably. To what do we owe your visit, Officer McNosley? Do you want fried meat too? McNosley nodded. No, I'm sorry to intrude, Mr. Hutchinson. We saw smoke from the road and decided to check it out. Are you all right? Hutchinson replied, still smiling. It's fine, sir. Thank you for guarding our peace. The officers bowed and left. In the car, McNosley picked up the walkie-talkie and hung up on reinforcements. Miguel grinned. You're too hypocritical, amigo. It seems to me that we could have done it without reinforcements. McNosley looked into Miguel's eyes. I'm not interested in what you think, Officer Forano. I acted according to the instructions. Miguel shrugged and didn't argue. There's still 1 hour left until the end of the patrol. Where are you going then, amigo? McNosley answered reluctantly. I'll drive the car to the police station and go to Mass. My wife and sons will be waiting for me there. Then I'll go home. I see. But we don't go to Mass with my Louise. Why? Miguel scratched his stubbly chin. My wife is from the Jehovah's sect, and I profess Protestant Christianity. McNosley continued to drive silently through the residential area. The boys were walking along a dark corridor which smelled of damp and something sharp. Ruan sniffed. It seemed to smell of gasoline or something combustible. And where does this corridor lead? Bobbins walked forward. There is a workshop ahead. I call it the engine room. That's where I found this balloon. And there were many more. Sturk and Ruan exchanged glances. The goal was close. And then you can leave this creepy place. There was no lighting, but ventilation grills had been punched through the concrete walls through which diffused light filtered. But it was still dark. The boys went to the door and opened it. Carmichael came to Mass, but he did not find his wife and children there. It wasn't far to the house, and he decided to go there right away. On the threshold, he saw his worried wife. What's wrong, dear? Where are Ruan and Sturk? The woman's gaze was agitated, one might even say alarmed. Honey, they didn't come back on time. They are still not at home. I do not know what to think. They went cycling and promised to come back. Carmichael clenched his jaw in anger, but then took his wife's hands. Don't worry, dear. I'll arrange for them to come back. Where did they go for a ride? Old Polly Grunberg heard the couple's conversation from behind the fence. She came closer and leaned on the whitewashed boards of a low fence. Mr. McNosley, I overheard your conversation by accident. The old lady smiled delicately. I saw your sons. When I was shopping at Winter's grocery store, you know, he got really mad. That arrogant Mr. Winters, he charged me as much as 90 cents for a can of tomatoes. Can you imagine? McNosley approached the fence. Mrs. Grunberg, do you know where they were going? The old lady looked at Carmichael in surprise. Who was heading? The man tried to hold on. My sons Ruan and Sturk, you've seen them. The old lady lightly slapped her forehead. Oh yes, they rode bicycles with that obnoxious beast Charlie Bobbins. They were driving along the sidewalk towards the exit to the old barrel factory. Carmichael was silent, and the old lady continued to talk. And you know, I worked there a long time ago. But before that terrible incident, how did they catch this scoundrel? The officer went into the house without saying anything to the old woman, Grunberg, in response, which somewhat discouraged her. He was on his way to the landline phone to call the police station. He got through a minute later. Central, this is Officer McNausley. I need a company car and my partner. At the central post, the officer was told that the car had been given to the patrol on duty, and Officer Ferrano was most likely already at home on a legal day off. Upon hearing the phrase, legal day off, McNausley almost screamed, but instead just hit the phone receiver on the lever, ending the conversation. Without explaining anything to his wife, he headed for the garage. Rowan took hold of the door handle and pulled it open, with Sturk standing behind him. Behind the doors was a small, unremarkable room that did not look like a huge workshop, much less an engine room. Rowan and Sturk turned and looked at Bobbins in disbelief. Well, where is your workshop? Instead of answering, the boy raised his fist to his face, unclenched it, and blew some kind of whitish powder into the faces of the two red-haired brothers. Oh, you! The old man tried to close himself off from the powder, but inhaled it. The smallest particles filled his nose, and the boy began to fall, gasping for breath. Ruan fell almost immediately, clutching his face with one hand and his throat with the other. After making sure that Sturk and Ruan were deep asleep, Bobbins entered the room and shouted, "Show up!" A man in a black tight-fitting hoodie appeared in the room as if from nowhere. He had a very ordinary human face. Everything is like everyone else's: nose, mouth, cheekbones, chin, and eyes. But his eyes, they were divided as if into two, and each half had its own black pupil. Bobbins came close to the man and pressed his cheek against his side, rubbing himself. There was something strange and unpleasant about this movement, as if reptilian and reptilian. "Dad, I brought them. As you asked, I did everything right." An unusual man hissed, calling Bobbins a strange, unusual name. "Ronv, you did everything as it should be. Take..." The man took a glass ball out of a large pocket on his hoodie and handed it to the boy, who opened his eyes wide with joy, staring at the glass ball. His eyes became the same as those of the one he called Dad. Two eyes, each of which was divided by a thin membrane in the middle. A black pupil moved in each half. It might seem that the pupils had a life of their own. They sometimes narrowed like a cat's, then gathered back into a circle. 3 pupils were aimed at the glass ball, and one was wandering from side to side at breakneck speed. The man's whistling voice sounded again. "Bronve, make a fire. Livelier." Bobbins, who was called Ronve, left the room and went somewhere. The man in the hoodie took Wash by the left leg, and Ruan by the right, lifted and stretched out in front of him. He sniffed at Ruan's side and licked his lips, then sniffed at Wash's head. But something did not like him. He recoiled, dropping the boys on the concrete floor. "You can see things in their true face." The man's eyes darted from side to side. The boys' ability to talk to each other without opening their mouths was obvious to him. Somehow he found out about it. Ruan flew in pitch-black darkness, seeing and feeling nothing, but he was aware of himself. My brother wasn't around, and it was scary. "Sturk, can you hear me? Laundry?" A whisper came from afar. "I hear you. I'm scared, Rui." "Where are we? I can't see anything, and I can't move. Something is holding me back." "Don't be afraid. We will definitely get out. I do not know where we are. There's something holding me back too." Suddenly, the boys found themselves next to each other, but still in utter emptiness, as if in the blackest vacuum of a starless universe. They hugged, but the joy of meeting in the otherworldly dimension was instantly replaced by inhuman horror. A huge spider was crawling towards them, right through the black light among the intangible darkness, its furry legs moving quickly. The spider was whispering, "Don't be afraid of me! Don't be afraid of me!" Sturk screamed first, and the vile spider grabbed his leg with its mandibles, lifted him up, and shook him. Ruan rushed at the spider, tried to bite its paw, but could not. The spider simply threw it away, then crawled on top and pinned it to the blackness, which became tangible and at the same time smelled of burnt plastic. Sturk woke up first. He tried to get up, but could not. He was wrapped in a black cloth and tied to a lounger like a panzer cot. The whole body was wrapped in cloth, except for the eyes and the right arm. He tried to scream, but couldn't. The cloth pressed his lips tightly together. It turned out only to mumble. Ruan also woke up from the dope, but he didn't mumble. He just stared at the ceiling, going crazy with fear. A man in a black hoodie was fussing against the wall, making intermittent, somewhat clumsy movements, dropping flasks and test tubes with unknown contents from the shelves. He was looking for something he alone knew. He got angry and threw bottles of unknown liquids and powders right on the floor. The bottles broke, and the room began to fill with a tart, unpleasant smell. Opening the top shelf, the man found what he was looking for. It was a spherical vessel with something pink. He took the vessel and inserted it into a tall device from which two thin, transparent hoses extended. Then he went over to the laundryman and took his hand. The boy was burnt with pain. He did not see what was being done to him, but he felt how his arm was strongly and deeply cut in the crook, and then something was shoved into the wound. The man did the same with Ruan. "Ruan, can you hear me? Do you hear me?" The boy mentally turned to his brother but could not get an answer. The man shook his head and turned it on its side like a praying mantis, looked directly into the face of the laundry, and he saw his monstrous eyes. "Hush, hush, he won't answer you. Hush, hush." Then a creature, not a man, but a terrible creature, tore the black cloth covering the boy's leg, and again the body burned with pain. Sturk felt the cot tilt forward, and blood was dripping from his leg directly onto the floor. At the same time, something was pouring into my hand. My mind began to fog up. A quarter of an hour later, Ruan and Sturk were asleep again. The creature stood between the bunks and waited for something. Bobbins Ronve entered the room. "Dad, I did everything as you said. The fire is burning. Should I take them to the stove or will you let me play with them?" Ronwe smiled terribly, rubbing his hands and feeling the blood. But the man just took his hand and led him away. This time they walked down the corridor to the side branch, then went down another level below, to where the smelter used to be. There was a flame burning in the huge stove, and it smelled strongly of gasoline. "Dad, why did we come here?" The adult creature silently stared at the fire, but then grabbed Runve's clothes and tore them off. The boy's skin was covered with red scabs and black scales in some places. He became unusually thin. The spine protruded from his back in a frequent ridge. His legs and arms were greatly elongated and ended with short claws. What are you doing?" The creature roughly grabbed the little monster by the throat and lifted it up. "I don't need you anymore. Run. Now they will be my sons. They can see." Ronwe hissed, gasping, sticking a long, writhing, slimy tongue out of his mouth. "No, don't have to." But the evil adult creature was relentless. He just threw Ronve into the fire like a piece of fluff and then closed the flap. "Gore on fire, Ronva." There was a wild squeal from behind the flap. Then a hail of blows followed the flap. But soon everything was silent. The creature straightened its robe and returned to the room where Sturk and Ruan were tied up on the bunks. Now they didn't need the bonds. The creature tore them off with clawed fingers. The boy's skin began to become covered with a blackish scab. Their legs and arms lengthened. All their blood was gradually replaced by a blue liquid. The creature woke them up, but did not let them move or speak. "I, your father, I came here from the chaos that you will comprehend, which will devour all mankind. My world is far beyond your world. I am evil." He handed Rowan and Wash the glass balls, one for each of them. "These are your souls now. I will teach you how to steal the souls of children." The last word sounded like an ominous whisper. Carmichael McNosley was inconsolable. His sons were missing, disappeared, as if they had disappeared. Absolutely no trace. In addition, Charlie Bobbins and his entire family are missing. During a search of their house, the rooms were found to be completely desolate. The smell of mold and utter mess. as if they had not lived there for 5 years or more, and at the same time, as if someone had died. Carmichael himself lived only 5 years before he reached his full 50s, after the disappearance of his children, while his wife, Mrs. Loretta McNosley, was slightly insane in her mind, often talked, cried, and worked part-time at a roadhouse on the border with Oklahoma until her old age. 4 years later, these two red-haired boys immediately became the heroes of the whole yard. They were mischievous hooligans and bullies, gave a kick to even the most desperate big men, famously fought, loved to shout and brag. Somehow, it goes without saying, a boy from the lower district on the outskirts of Anchorage named Louis Sparks became friends with them. Together, they chased cats, selflessly broke windows in small supermarkets, and ran away from the cops. This time, they were sitting on a metal swing that was broken and piled on its side. Ruan surreptitiously nudged his brother in the side, and he realized what needed to be done. He took out a glass ball from his warm pants and showed it to Sparks. Have you ever seen one like this? A miracle, not a balloon. Look how it glows. Sparks gazed rapturously at the glass sphere. Wow, and where did you buy one, bro? Ruan replied. Nowhere, you can't buy one like that. Do you know the abandoned weather station across the creek at Mount Rathmore? Sparks nodded. Well, yes. Ruan got up from the swing. That's where they found it. We're thinking of going out once today. I think there were more.
Hello, Strange. I am a recent subscriber to your channel, and I want to share a story that one of my doctor friends told me during a meeting over a glass of tea. I don't know if you and your subscribers will believe it or not, but he is an adult, respectable man, holds the position of chief physician in a large Baltic clinic. I would never have expected to hear such a story from him. But as they say, for what I bought, for what I sell. Next, the story will be on his behalf. So, it was many years ago when I was still working as an ambulance paramedic. The job, you know what it was like. Here you have drunks with a squirrel, and attacks of appendicitis and birth colic, and whatnot. And of course, how to do without such a category as the elderly. For some of them, we have already become like family, because they called us very often. There were old men, God's dandelions, and there were those who exhausted the entire nervous system for some non-existent source. At the same time, their health was better than that of our entire brigade. I've seen a lot of things in general, but there is one case that I have never told anyone about. There was, such a suspicion that after that they could replace my doctor's coat with a straitjacket. Or even worse, they will be locked up somewhere in a research laboratory for the rest of their lives. I don't even need such happiness for nothing. But I'll tell you. Why did I mention pensioners? There was an old grandfather among our regular clientele. Gray-haired as a harrier, he lived alone in a private house on the outskirts of the city. I was not a malingering. Few people have Olympic health at the age of 89. Problems with the heart, nervous system, and even, as it turned out later, the old man had mental problems. It's not that he's schizophrenic or, God forbid, violent, but Grandpa was a bit weird. He didn't communicate much with any of the neighbors, lived as a recluse, and even when he had seizures, refused to be hospitalized. He was so kind, hospitable, but as soon as it came to putting him for examination, he became like a flint. He will frown, and not in any way. I'm waiting for my grandson, he says, and everything. And what kind of grandson, from where? Not a word. For a very long time, we were so busy with him. Well, Davidas got used to our visits. That was his name. One evening, when our shift was almost over, and there were no more new calls, he offered to have tea. Well, I think an old man is bored. Why not? I warned the driver of the car that I would be a little late. He was sympathetic. Well, we drink tea and have a conversation with Davidas for life. And he told me about his grandson, whom he is waiting for. It was after this story that his mental problems became clear to me. The story is this. More than 30 years ago, they went with their grandson to the forest. Mushrooms and berries, that's it. At that time, it was not yet a suburb, but a regional village, and the neighboring forest was a full-fledged forest in which you could get lost. It was in this forest that grandfather's grandson disappeared. He says they walked through the woods, and at first everything was fine. Grandpa knew all the paths. The forest was like his own. And suddenly, bang, he got lost. The places are all unfamiliar, as if a goblin is driving. They walked, wandered, and it was already getting dark. Davidas, as an experienced man, had already begun to think about how he and his grandson would settle down for the night, but suddenly they heard some strange hum. Moreover, as he said, the hum was not external, but as if inside the head. At first I thought it was from pressure, but my grandson also said I could hear it, and they'd follow that sound. We walked and eventually got out into a large clearing, and there, grandfather says, he was stunned with surprise. I see, he says, there is some big thing in the center of the clearing, the size of an airplane. But without wings, it is disc-shaped and glows with a neon blue light. It cost Davidas, he does not understand what it is at all. And the grandson, a 6-year-old boy, became very interested and ran closer to her to examine her. At this age, everything is interesting, but the sense of self-preservation in 6-year-olds is not particularly developed. Grandpa is screaming, "Where are you going, Robert?" to stop. He wanted to rush after his grandson, he says, but suddenly realized that he couldn't move. How paralyzed everything was. And the grandson ran very close to that object, and suddenly a blue light flashed, so brightly that Davidas lost his eyesight for a while, and then completely turned off. And when he came to himself, it turned out that he was standing on the highway about 50 kilometers from that forest. He stands alone, there is no grandson. Davidas preferred not to talk about what happened next. He only said that the authorities and search engines searched the entire forest 3 times, but they did not find either that clearing or Roberta's. Then he added that his grandson was supposed to go to 1st grade at fall, and that after this incident, his daughter, Roberta's mother, simply cut her father out of her life. 10 years later, however, she did get in touch, but she did not come to the village anymore. As I understand it, it was painful for her to see the places where her 6-year-old son's life was so tragically cut short. After that incident, the neighbors began to shun Davidas, and he also began to live as a recluse, almost without leaving his native home. He says the pain in his soul was such that in the end, he decided to voluntarily leave this world and had already begun to prepare rope and soap. But before this fateful step, he had a strange dream. He saw his Robertus, who was inside either an aircraft or a spaceship, and he told him that he was fine. And at the end he added, "Don't worry, Grandpa, I'll be back. Wait for me." So Davidas has been waiting for 30 years, decrepit along with his house. I was waiting for my grandson. When I heard this story, I felt ambivalent. On one hand, it was a pity to tears for this good man, whom life had treated so cruelly. But the fact that he is clearly mentally ill, I was extremely alarmed. I do not know what the real details of that story were, but the fact that the loss of Robertus and a long walk in the forest without water and food led Davidas to insanity. This fact was obvious to me as a doctor. Of course, I did not ask why he was not assigned to a mental hospital at the time. Maybe the examination did not reveal pathologies and behavior dangerous to society, or maybe it was just medical negligence. I do not know. But just in case, for future visits, I decided to take a sedative with me. And in general, you need to be more careful. Yes, he's not physically stronger than me, but you never know. Harm can be done in different ways. To stab unexpectedly with a knife or to mix the same rat poison in tea, for example. It's good that this time I saw the process of making tea with my own eyes and poured it out to us from one kettle. And what will happen next time? No, God, it's necessary to keep an eye out here. The opportunity to keep an eye out presented itself to me after a few days. Moreover, I was not at work at all that day. Just imagine, it's evening, you have certain plans, but suddenly the dispatcher calls and says that Davidas really asked me to come. What the hell? I say, another team is working today, so let them go, and I have a day off. No, they answer. Davidas asked you to come, he doesn't need others. I mentally wished my grandfather a long life, but there was nothing to do. I had to send all my plans to hell and go there alone on my own. It is clear that I got to my grandfather's house after dark and was not in the best mood. And as soon as he crossed the threshold of the house, he became alert. Something was wrong here. Davidas immediately caught my eye with some kind of perfect order and kept the house clean, for which he had special respect at his age. It was so easy to put on a marathon. And anyway, you know, men and order in the house very often do not intersect in life at all. But now everything was somehow cleanly cleaned, and even the smell. In his house, there was always the smell of some tinctures, medicines, and the subtle aroma of some old Soviet perfume. And now the house smelled like ozone. That's how it happens after a summer thunderstorm. and it was very strange. The owner of the house surprised no less. He was cheerful, and with a kind of joyful gleam in his eyes. Seeing this, I tensed up even more, and he says to me, "I'm very sorry for interrupting you from your work, but I want to say goodbye. You treated me with all your heart. I want to thank you and share my joy with you. And where are you going, Dividas? Are you moving in with your daughter?" I say, No, Grandpa laughs, and his eyes are so joyful. My grandson has finally returned. Robertus is mine. He's taking me with him. In the first few minutes, I couldn't even find something to say. That's the number, I think. The grandson was drawn from the other world. They sailed. It seems that the grandfather's flask has finally whistled. It is necessary to determine the fool. And I smile back and say, "That's the deal. Well, congratulations to you. And where does he, your Robertus?" "So he's here." "Robertus, say hello to your uncle." Davidas says and looks somewhere behind me. I think, well, for sure, it seems that only one grandfather sees this Robertus. And suddenly I heard a child's voice behind me. "Hello." I jumped up in surprise. I turned around abruptly and saw a little kid about 6 years old standing next to me. I'm sick of it. I could have sworn he wasn't in the room when I came in. He must have crept in from the next room, but how quiet. I didn't hear a single step. I look at this Robertus. I say to him hello, and I think, the kid disappeared more than 30 years ago. Now it's an adult man, should be under 40, and this one. "Everything is different there," Grandpa suddenly said, as if guessing my thoughts. "We hardly age there, and I will be able to return my wasted years," Robertus promised. "I'm with him now, and then we'll take his mother, my daughter. I've suffered too much over the years, poor thing." I listened to him, and I look at my grandson who had returned. He looks like an ordinary preschooler, of which there are many, except that the eyes are sky blue so much so that practically no whites are visible, and also the skin with some kind of matte shade, although it probably seemed like it. And there was also a look, something very childish, a strange look, at the same time appreciative, indifferent, and as if burning through. Robertus looked at me in silence, but averted his gaze. As we stared at each other, he didn't blink once. And then I understood everything. It seems that Davida's age and mental instability led to the fact that he picked up some street kid, dubbed him grandson, and judging by the unblinking gaze of Robertus, pumped him with some pills or drugged him with something. And what's next? And only the inflamed brain of a pensioner knows this. But the fact that nothing good will happen is a fact. In general, we need to get this kid out of here somehow, call the neighbors, net his grandfather, and call the paramedics. Otherwise, there will be trouble. Nunavitas, congratulations. Do you mind if Robertus and I go into the kitchen? I need to ask him a couple of questions, I say, and I think, let's go now, grab this kid in my arms and run outside. And then it's a matter of technique. Step back, of course, the grandfather answers, and whether it was from the wrong room lighting, it seemed to me that his eyes also seemed to have become a bluer shade. Just for a while, it's time for us to go. But I didn't just call you to show off my grandson. You always treat me with all respect. Without your treatment, I would not have waited for Robertus. And yes, I understand that you don't believe me. You think I'm crazy? Come on, Dividas, how can you, I say? Don't interrupt your elders. I didn't believe it, but that's okay. I wouldn't believe it either if I were you. But you're still a good person, and we decided to give you a gift. And as for the rest, the time will come, you will understand everything. With these words, Grandpa pulled out a small card the size of a credit card from the breast pocket of his shirt and handed it to me. I accepted it without a murmur, because I knew that it was better not to argue with crazy people. He turned it in his hands and examined it. There were no inscriptions on it, just a rectangle of blue-black color on both sides, but I still didn't understand what it was made of. It feels like metal, but bends like plastic. Thank you, Dividas. I put the card in my pocket, and what is it? This is a pass. Excuse me, but where's the pass? To us, Robertus answered for his grandfather. One day we will return. Davidas added, do not lose and do not give it to anyone. Now go and talk to Robertus about what you want. Thank you for everything. And he held out his hand to say goodbye. The 89-year-old pensioner's handshake turned out to be surprisingly strong. There are no hints of senility or senile weakness. And the skin was also a matte shade. What's going on here? When Robertus and I went out into the hallway near the kitchen, I was already thinking about how to grab this guy comfortably in my arms, so that I could run outside with him and call for help, when suddenly he looked me straight in the eyes and said, You don't have to do anything. Thanks for Grandpa. Goodbye, and then he touched my hand, and then I didn't understand what happened. My vision blurred for a second, and when my vision returned, I was already standing on the street in front of Davita's house. I don't know how I got there. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief and stared at the house I was in a moment ago. In the twilight of the night, the uncurtained windows shone and the interior of the room, which had become so familiar during all this time, was clearly visible. Two silhouettes, tall and short, suddenly closed one of the window openings. My grandfather and grandson were looking at me from the window, and the taller silhouette suddenly waved at me, as if saying goodbye, and then there was a bright blue flash, and the windows went out, as, however, all the street lights and windows in the neighboring houses. Dogs barked and the front doors of houses slammed. People took to the streets and shouted across the plots, asking if everyone had lost electricity. And only no one came out of Davita's house. I already knew there was no one inside. If you think that this is not proof of the existence of aliens, then you are right. There is much more evidence, and on our channel we will reveal all the secrets and evidence of their presence. I decided to show you this letter unchanged. I decided to tell my story of meeting, as it seems to me, with something alien. I was about 12 years old at the time, give or take a year. So many details have been erased from my memory, but the overall picture has remained unchanged. I was already quite independent, so I went to various clubs and sections where hyperactive parents signed me up. That's when, returning home from the football section, I decided to cut through the park. By the way, that park was not abandoned, but it was approaching the state. Not the largest, with a couple of permanent attractions, a man-made pond, stalls, and benches. Some of the tiled paths were spoiled somewhere by nature, and somewhere by people. The roots of nearby trees lifted some of the tiles, skewing or completely splitting them. Strange personalities also stole several tiles. The trees, incredibly tall for such an area, in fact, were almost not cared for, occasionally pruning branches that were too long. I think you, comrades and Nona, have already imagined this picture. My path ran along the shore of that very man-made reservoir, a small lake whose shores are overgrown. That's where I saw it. The water in the center of the lake was slightly glowing. This light, I cannot describe it, comrades and nuns. He's not from here. I haven't seen anything like it before or since. It's like a mixture of all colors, at the same time the absence of every single one of them. Something that could not exist on our planet. And the glow was gaining strength. Now only a small spot in its center glows. Now it begins to expand, and now the whole lake is shining with this color. A painful, unearthly, frightening color. I tried to run, but I stumbled and fell shamefully on my ass. The glow was gaining strength and steam began to rise from the surface of the water. It was getting thicker and rising higher, as if forming something like a tornado, but without wind. In the seconds it took me to crawl away and rest against a tree, this thing became almost twice as thick and tall. And so, when the concentration reached the limit, the smoke, steam, gas, in short, this thing began to rotate, twisting as if around its axis. She spun faster and faster, and now, with a pillar of the same light pierced the heavens, finally going outside. God only knows how I stayed dry at that moment. But the worst part was something else. As I was leaving, I suddenly felt eyes on me, a strange, cold, studying look. There would be no running without any looking back. I turned around. And saw the remains of this creature. Yes, now I'm sure it's a creature, and worse, it's intelligent. The swirls of that strange gas still hung in the air, continuing to rotate around its axis. But this axis was directed at me. It was as if a grotesque eye hung over the pond and fixed its heavy gaze on me. But the swirls finally blinked and pulled into the water. How I ran that evening. I've never run like this before. I ran through this thrice-cursed park, jumping over roots, running around low branches, and finally got to a stop. In general, for about a month I didn't think about that damn park and this thing, whatever it is. I just stopped taking a shortcut along the way to the bus stop and began to go around. Longer, but I had no desire to return to that lake. It was only a month later that I got sick. According to the symptoms, the flu. It was already autumn, so I wasn't particularly surprised by this. I felt, by the way, just disgusting. Much worse than with the usual flu, which I already had. This went on for 3 days, and then the dreams came. Although now I'm not sure if they were dreams. A completely white room, a quiet hum coming from the walls, and again these creatures, as if woven from fog. And the light. This abnormal light of an incomprehensible shade was also here. I don't really know, or rather don't remember what happened to me. The eyes seemed to be filled with water or something similar. This thing did not interfere with seeing in any way, but an unpleasant feeling remained. The creatures talked to me about something, and I even answered them something. Not of his own volition, as if he was in a dream. Such a disgusting feeling when you are not able to control your body and everything happens as if on automatic. And it was also cold there, like an autumn evening. Not a fierce frost, but a chill that penetrates to the very depths, from which the hair stands on end all over the body. Something was definitely happening to me there, something was being done to me. Sometimes after waking up, I found healing scars or bruises on my body. On the stomach, on both arms, above the elbows, and on the palms, on the temples, on the neck, on the calves of the legs. These marks looked as if they had been inflicted on me for a very long time and rarely lingered beyond one day. What is even more strange, there was always something wrong in the room, as in the evening. An open window, books piled on the floor, or clothes lying out of place. It was freaking scary and stressful. Yes, by the way, I was ill for about a week, after which everything abruptly passed, as if there was no illness. Well, it's almost over. The dreams remained. Each time they changed, each time stronger and stronger. If at first I was lying down, then after that very week I was already sitting up. Pictures flashed through my mind that I just couldn't realize. However, there were also familiar images. Images of what I saw on Earth, I feel like, tested. They asked about something and I answered, being in the same disgusting state, without control over myself. Bruises and scars stopped appearing, but headache and eye problems took their place. Sometimes the picture just blurred, or it was as if new colors were added to it. Colors that I couldn't name, because I didn't even know how to describe them. And this, gentle and anons, was even worse than bruises. Before that, I could blame everything on my own carelessness and training, albeit with some difficulty, but now I began to seriously suspect whether I was going crazy. I didn't even think of telling my parents or some school psychologist at that time. They won't believe it at best, but they can cling on and send them to pass all sorts of tests. I was a fool then, what can I do? However, this story ended quickly enough. The events were repeated almost as at the very beginning. I got lost in thought and turned towards the park. Yes, the one who swore to bypass the 10th road. And most stupidly, I went exactly the same way as the last time. When it dawned on me where I had stumbled into, it was too late to turn around. That ill-fated lake was spread out in front of me again. And yes, it started to glow again. Except this time, it was a little different. I, too, was pulsing with this strange light, as if something in me was responding to the call of what was in the lake. By that time, I had already spat on everything. My body was not listening to me again, as in those dreams. Were they dreams, though? I'm not sure about that anymore. All I had to do was freeze and hope that I could survive this evening, at least partially. Never, comrades, have I been so afraid before. Watching the funnel grow and expand of an incomprehensible color and origin, and how, in response to its flickering, my own light begins to pulsate more and more. I was terrified. Primal animal horror. That's what I felt then. I was so engrossed in my fear that I didn't immediately notice the change. The light pulsing around me seemed to be attracted to a large tornado that now towered over the lake. As if through a siphon, the glow flowed and absorbed into it. About a minute passed, as the glow around me went out, and the tornado began to twist again with incredible force, as it was the first time. However, something has changed again. An incredible weakness came over me, as if I hadn't slept for 3 days. I staggered and fell to the ground. I don't know how long I was lying on the ground, but when I woke up my body was numb, and there were several missed messages from my mother on the phone. Despite this, I laughed. He laughed joyfully and slightly hysterically, listening to the rustle of leaves on the trees around and the splash of water. Such native and understandable sounds and colors. I was incredibly happy. I survived, and finally it's all over. 20 years have passed since that moment, and I still don't know what to think about it. I can't tell if it was distorted memories and dreams of a child or really something alien. The only thing I know for sure is that after that incident, the vision in both my eyes dropped by about 1. This is my only proof of the reality of what happened in that ill-fated month. I am still sure that I was abducted almost every night and carried out some experiments, but alas, I do not have any serious evidence. If you think that this is not proof of the existence of aliens, then you are right. There is much more evidence, and on our channel we will reveal all the secrets and evidence of their presence. Subscribe to the channel and send me your stories related to aliens by email. You will find contacts in the About the Channel section. Together, we will force the authorities of all countries to disclose all the information they have. After all, people should know the truth.